Hi everyone, my name is Diane Hogno and I am from BSIT 1F1. And for today, I'm going to show you a simple code, simple program that is one of our tasks. And for my debugger, I will use Visual Studio for my program. So let's start. As you can see, I have a couple of created program projects here. And as for today, I already have a created project for this video. And this project is named as Computer Programming 2. So here it goes. As you can see, that the namespace is the collection of classes. And as for today's program, our class entitled as Computer Programming 2. And as you can also see, the starting line is already the console.write line, hello world. And this is not the program that we're going to make. So we need to delete it. And before we go to the execution, to the program itself, we need to initialize and declare various variables that we need in our program. So first is we need to type the int input underscore num. Don't forget the semicolon. As you can see here, I use the int. I use the variable int, short for integers, wherein the integers is the storage of whole numbers. So we use int because we're going to enter whole numbers only. We don't need to enter characters or a number with decimals because it will be an error. So in our program today, we need to put the variable int for our code. And input num is the declaration of the input numbers of a user to a program. So this means that all the numbers that the user will input is literally came from input num. And for our second is int find input. So another is int find input. In our task or in our activity, we need to find the hahanaping input or the equivalence. And this int find input is the solution for us to find the equivalent or the hahanaping input in our program. So this int find input, these lines initialize the finding number or the equivalent number from the user. Next is int num. So our third variable is int num, wherein in int num, it is the declaration of numbers that will be inputted or entered by the user. So in int num, it is the source of the input of the entered numbers from the user. Next is int or integer even equals 0. Why does we need to put an equal 0 in our even or in our variable even? Because we don't have any declared even numbers yet. So we need to tell in our compiler that even is equals to 0. And also, it initializes the even numbers. And this will, all the even numbers that the user will input will be in here. This serves as the container of all the even numbers. Next is int odd equals 0. Same as with even numbers, int odd equals 0 is also the container that serves as the storage of all the odd numbers from the user in entered numbers. And also this initialize the odd numbers. And our last declared variable will be int equivalence equals 0. And we need to use this int equivalence equals 0 for us to find the equivalence value of this program, to have to show the output or the equivalence value of this program. So now we are done in initialization and declaration of the variables. Now let's start in execution. So in execution, we need to type, or in execution, we need to find how many outputs. We need to display the word how many outputs and how it will be. So to display the how many inputs, we need to type or write the console dot write. As you can see, I use the word write instead of write line, because in write or in console write, the inputted or the entered number will be beside of the word of the text how many inputs, while in write line, if we will enter a number, that will be under the word how many inputs or below the word how many inputs. So instead of write line, I use console.write. So let's type how many inputs. How many inputs? There you go. So don't natin kakalimutan, or don't forget the semicolon. In this code or in this line, this will help us to display. Again, this will display the word how many inputs, and this serves as the go signal wherein in this word we can enter a number. Our next line will be a conversion of input num. So in order to convert it, we need to enter this. There you go. Input num. So, in order to enter or in order to have an entered number here in how many inputs, we need to convert the input num here, input num to 2 in 32. We need to convert it in order for us to have an entered number here in how many inputs. And also because of we already converted it, we can now we can now enter we can now enter a number beside this how many inputs text. Next is we're done with how many inputs. Now let's find or let's code the hahanaping input. So console dot write line write console dot write rather hahanaping input rather hahanaping input. In hahanaping input, this text will display in our output, and because of this code console.write hahanaping input, this serves as our go signal wherein we can enter a number here. But before we can enter a number, we must convert the hahanaping input or the find input variable. So in order to convert it, as well as like this, just copy. We will just copy, and later we can so instead of input num, we can type find input. Oh, there you go. The hanaping input or the find input is already converted. So now, as we debug this program later, we can enter a number here beside the hahanaping input. And this is not yet finished because in this execution or in conversion, I just need to add something. Just need to add something like new line. So in our new line here, that's the symbol of new line, -n, which means new line or spacing between two lines, for us to have a clean output later, to avoid being being magkakadikit, para hindi maging magkakadikit yung mga output natin mamaya, yung mga pag-print natin or yung output ay maiwasan natin ang pagkakadikit-dikit. So, we're done in conversion. Now, let's go to loopings. And we can find the output without a looping. Looping or loop is used for the execution repeatedly. So here in our execution, here in our program, we need to to use loopings. And for our loopings, I need to use for. And int as you can see here, in the condition for condition or the statement inside the parenthesis or the conditional statement, I entered int n equals n because the n will be used later in the sa pagbaba natin or in the further code, n will be used and n means the number. And magsisimula or we will begin the value of n will begin in 1. And here, n less than or equal to input num, and n plus plus or n increment means adding 1 or increment by adding 1. So curly braces, don't forget the curly braces, and the curly braces is used for separation of the loop. So after formulating the for loop and the conditional statement, inside this curly bracket, we will write console dot write input. So why we need to add or to write the console.write input and n? Because without this line or without this code, we can't enter the various numbers that the user want to enter, because here in input, because this input word, this can be displayed in our output, and also this input word is the go signal wherein you can enter a number that you want. And as you can see here, there's an n, and here n is equals to 1, but because of an increment, it will be add by 1. So here is the display word in our output later, input. And next is we need to convert. So here, I converted the num. So all the numbers right here, all the numbers that will be entered will be converted and appear beside this input word later on later when we run our program. So, after getting the input number from the user, we'll now going to check whether there's a equivalence or equivalent number that the user entered from the find input. So, we're going to write if statement. So, in our if statement, if num equals to find input, this will determine if there's an equivalence of the entered number from the find input or the equivalence. And now we're going to have the equivalence increment. But if there's no equivalence value, or there's no same value in num and in find input, then we're going to add another statement, the else statement, if no. So if num modulo 2 equals to 0. If num modulo 2 equals to 0, this is the condition wherein we can find the even. So we have another even increment. If there's an even number, then it will be incremented by 1. Next is if we have even, then we need odd. Add increment for so as you can see, we have the equivalence increment, and also we have the equivalence, the condition wherein we can get the equivalence. Also, we have the condition getting the even. And if there's no even, then this will mapupunta siya dito sa add. And we also have the add increment, which will be the add will be incremented by 1. So after making a loop, we're now going to make a code displaying the number of odd, even, and equivalence number in the user's entered number. So console.writeLine, and I will add the new line, symbol for new line, for distancing. As you can see, I use a placeholder wherein later the value or the number of odd numbers will be put in placeholder. let's see. Wait. Add. And another for even. And another for equivalence. So these are the code that can display the amount or the number of odd, even, and equivalents in the user input number. And for the last code or last line, we're going to put the end line or the console dot red key. So here is our code. So you can see here, there's no issue found. So I guess we can run it. How many inputs? Let's say 5. Hahanaping input, 10. So because of the new line or the dash n, this and spacing between hahanaping input and input. So let's enter numbers. 7, 10, 2, 9, 10. Oops, sorry, 10. So as you can see here, I entered 5 number. And here, the add is 2, even is 1, and equivalence is 2. So for clearer view, here is the output. So that's all. And I hope I instruct it clearly for you to analyze it like what I did to my program. So that's all. Thank you.